Hi, I'm resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sains. This is with buddy Gordon Dymowski. That's with buddy Alan Gallant. We are here to review the movie Quatermass 2, which, let's see, was also called Enemy from Space in the United States and Canada,
Yes.
which I did not know that until looking that up here. So that's interesting. Um, this is science fiction horror. When did you guys first see this movie, Gordon?
I first saw it in high school because I was becoming a Doctor Who fan, and when you enter Doctor Who fandom, you start to learn about other shows. And Quatermass, back in the day, we had discussed Quatermass in the Pit, which is the third serial
with a different Quatermass. Yeah.
So on television, there were three serials: Quatermass Experiment, Quatermass 2, and Quatermass from the Pit. A while ago, we all did, well, not all of us here, but most of us did Quatermass in the Pit. So this is the prequel. And so I'd seen this because the actual film of the television version was not available at that time.
Right.
So this and the first movie, which was the Quatermass Experiment or the Creeping Unknown, was my exposure to it. And I also was purchasing Doctor Who Target books. And at that point, Target released they were paperbacks of the scripts of the television episodes. So that's kind of how I first encountered this movie.
Alan?
I actually had never seen this one before. I went straight to the third one because it was on television at some point, and I watched it, which is Quatermass in the Pit. And I've never been exposed to the television series, so that was my only reference point was the Pit. So this was interesting to watch and to see Don Levy portraying Quatermass. So
yeah, this was a really great selection by Gordon and Patrick. And I had never seen this movie here or any of the Quatermass movies. But until we did the one
Quatermass in the Pit.
Yeah, Quatermass in the Pit. But this is a really fun movie. You have, in a sense, a weird looking alien monster movie, but it's full of action, suspense, and you got a lot of stuff going on here. You got people who are infected. It almost feels like like a different version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Would I be?
It has a creature feature element to it. Absolutely.
Because this movie was made right after. First, what you might not know is it's a Hammer film. The first two, all the Quatermass movies are Hammer films. The original series, which was Quatermass on the BBC, was 3 6-part serials, each a half hour. So we're talking 3 hours long. And Quatermass 2 was the serial that had the television version had issues, mostly because the person who played him, Quatermass, in the first serial died like 2 weeks before they went live, and these went out live.
Mm-hmm. Classic stuff. Yeah, classic.
Yeah. So the actor they hired, and you can find the original television version if you dig deep enough in YouTube. You can find he's a lot of critics have said that he comes off as wooden and stiff and unaware. But if you're hired 2 weeks for a live television thing and you've got to rehearse and learn your lines, you can forgive that. But these films were basically efforts for the BBC to market the series abroad, because the first Quatermass series, they only recorded the first 2 episodes because the BBC thought, what are we going to do with this? Because it was their first big, spectacular television event. It's like, what are we going to do with this? We can't sell it. But that's a whole other talk. But so this was of the second serial. It's also the first where Both the first and the second movies were directed by Val Guest, who Neil did not like. And Neil was very much I'm talking about big ideas here. I don't want to do just monsters and stuff like that. But he also his mind is in that kind of science fiction horror. You can see a lot of Nigel Neal and John Carpenter.
Sure.
You can see a lot of that. And this film was co-written by Neil because he did not like the script of the first one. So I think they were taking all the ideas of that second serial, which at 3 hours, it's a bit of a drag, but it's also 1950s television. And I think I think all the films are really good. The last two films are really good, kind of almost summaries of what you would watch in the television serial. And
this one is action packed for sure. I mean, it's got it moves quite nicely.
Yeah, because a lot of British television of the 50s and 60s is very talky.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you've got, and I think one of the things that, I could see why Neil and Guest co-wrote it, because it's like Guest had to say, look, Nigel, I know you're all about the deals, but no one's going to want to watch 3 hours worth of conversation.
Right.
And I think what makes this work is this movie work for me is that it's an interesting take on an alien invasion, because it's not just, oh, hey, aliens come out. Like, you've got the big kind of, aliens kind of walking through, but it's all about subtle.
And that's a reveal at the end. So that's classic creature features. The better creature features of the 50s. You didn't see a lot of the creature until the climax of the movie or whatnot, where you really got a good look at it. And that seems to be the case here. Instead, you have this sort of energetic possession of human beings by the creatures,
Yeah.
Gives it an air of mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the effect is they look like their face is sort of burnt a bit, and their face looks like it has like the swollen, like somebody maybe hit somebody.
There's like a little scar you get.
Yeah.
That's the sign that someone's taken over. It's the mark.
Yeah.
Point of entry, probably. Yeah.
And really good from the effects department. I really like how they did the dome, the creatures, the three creatures. It looked really cool here.
Mm-hmm.
And I love
the first reveal of the whole thing. The matte paintings are pretty cool in this movie. They did a pretty good job with matte paintings, because that's when you see that experimental city when they first come over there. That's just a big, huge matte painting. It's quite beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
So, then when you first come up close to the dome, it's a matte painting with a set in front of it. Of the entryway and all of that sort of thing. So it was cleverly done.
Did Quatermass start off as a book, Gordon?
No, it was actually, and here's a little bit of British television history, because that's why you're here, folks. You're not here for the Dark Shadows. You're not here for our conversation. You're here for British history. The BBC was trying to figure out. BBC hadn't been in existence since the 30s. They only went offline during World War II. Understandable.
Yes.
And for a while they were doing live television plays. And in the 40s they're trying to figure out, okay, and 50s are trying to figure out, okay, what can we do to make this more viable? First thing they do is they go, okay, we're going to do serials rather than plays, because you create one set, you can create one set. Your upfront cost is to build those set or two, and then you just move it further. Then they decided, okay, we want to do something. If we're going to start doing one of our serials, we can do classic literature, but if we're going to do something original, and these were actual conversations that were had within the BBC, they realized, okay, we want to do science fiction, and they hired a guy who was best noted at that time for doing the first ever television adaptation of 1984, starring Peter Cushing, and that's Nigel Neal. And so this wasn't, Neal, I think, probably pulled from stuff he read as a kid. But it's not like he took a book and said, I'm going to adapt it. I think he was trying to talk about how do I put these big science fiction concepts into practicality? And one of his big influences, which he cited, was H.G. Wells, because Wells had that ability to put kind of fantastic, more scientific concepts, but do it allegorically. So like the Quatermass experiment was about 3 astronauts are sent into space. The ship comes back. Only one of them is still alive. What happened? And it's very much reminiscent of, and it's a show that I know Jewel has some aversion to, which is The Twilight Zone. If you look at the episode "And the Sky Was Opened," where they start disappearing, that was an actual fear in early space travel, that we're going up into emptiness. We don't know what's up there.
Right.
And so doing the second serial, I think Neil was probably wanting to do something a little bit more of a traditional invasion, but I think he was also wanting to look at, say, he was dealing with that kind of Cold War stuff of, that Cold War idea of, okay, they're taking over, you lose your individuality.
Yeah, paranoia of that kind of stuff.
And I think he was also taking some shots at the government, where it's like, okay, how do we get this done? And one of the things that Neil also does, and this I think is a definite influence on Doctor Who, is focusing on the effects. And he stole this straight from Wells. It's the focus of the effects of the fantastic upon regular people. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think this film works the way it does, is that the focus isn't all on scientists and military trying to do things. There's a town that one town's destroyed. There's people in another village are like, what the heck's going on? And I think that helps give it that action and helps drive the story, because it's not just aliens are here, let's fight, let's kill them. It's like,
right.
it's like a buildup of circumstances where you just kind of go, where you're just kind of, I'm thinking of the scene towards the end in the pressure room, where they're like, okay, something's dripping. Oh, it's blood.
Yeah.
Oh, it's human pulp. And you kind of get, it's that like,
they'd stuff these guys into the pipe to
right.
block it off. Yeah. Another interesting aspect of this, and I don't know if Neil was super aware of it, must have been somewhat aware of it, is that there's a detective aspect to this too. I mean, Quatermass is, figuring things out along with the audience as we move forward in this whole thing. And he's running into the obstacles of disbelief and various other things. Like the townspeople are also like working on the construction of this place, even the ones that aren't taken over. And so there's money coming in for these guys. And the pub scene is really kind of interesting in that respect. They eventually all realize they've been had, but before that, they basically want to tear Quatermass to ribbons, for suggesting that this is a bad idea. So there's plenty of obstacle and action that way as well.
Yeah, they do a really good job of laying out this story too, and the parent, because he's the one guy trying to convince everybody, and when he does finally reach some people, it's like, nah, the fact that they made it look like they stuffed bodies in a pipe, and you got this blood coming down. I'm thinking, man, this was ahead of its time a bit to do this.
Well, and I think too, Neil is kind of taking a slight dig at mob mentality, because the big enemy is you lose your humanity, but he's kind of looking at these people who are just like, even when they're in the, just before that scene, there's a guy who's like, oh, well, I'll just call them. We'll go over there. We'll see what's going on. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like, no, like they have guns.
Yes, indeed. Even as the inhumanity of the aliens becomes obvious, the flawed humanity of of the townspeople is
Yeah.
also sort of becoming more obvious.
And it gives it that danger too, because it's like you have the flaw of humans and you have the aliens. You have to decide who to trust and make sure that the person you're trusting isn't infected, isn't turned. It's like,
and I tell you, these aliens weren't messing around. They figured out that machine guns were a really great way of mowing down humans. It's awesome. Of course, they're not. I mean, they're partially human anyway. They were formally human in that form, but yeah, it's an interesting. I thought it was a nice, for want of a better word, gimmick to have them be in human form to take over human beings.
yeah, it's very. How do I put this? I sort of wondered if the aliens, when they took over the humans, that they knew how to. They were smart enough to know how the human mind works.
Their behavior was somewhat odd, but
Yeah,
but still, I think they knew how to fool them or entice them or trick them, that kind of thing.
Well, it wasn't even. I don't think it's even that complicated. They just basically shot rocket-shaped, set rocket-shaped stones, and human picks it up, it explodes, and they take over your nervous system.
Right.
So and I think that's one of the things that is. I think it's one of the hallmarks of Neil's writing is that his alien menaces. There's a logic to them, but it's never that kind of we're going to take over because we want your because in Quatermass in the Pit, even though it's discovered that that it's a ship from Mars presumably that had they have evidence that these aliens, like, we learn why we think the aliens created this whole humanity. Basically, it's like, hey, our planet's dying and we need to put something of ourselves down. So let's do that. And I think that idea of it's a very Lovecraftian idea of like these creatures that we don't know what their overall motivations were, or their motivations are so geared towards self-preservation that they will actually change one form of creature into another.
Sure.
Or take over one in order to get what they want.
A series that kind of borrows some of this concept is Dragon Ball GT with the truffles a bit. Just a bit.
That would be it'd be interesting to see if the creators picked up on that, or if that's just or if they just said like, oh, that's a great idea, we'll use it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard because you can, like, there's a lot in this story that I can see in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
In fact, in the televised version, there's a very famous scene. There's a sweeping shot that goes to a shot of the planet Earth. Then it cuts to a radio telescope spinning around. Then it cuts to two scientists sitting in front of a computer of a console. The way this movie does, only a little bit different. And Doctor Who has ripped off that. Both classic Who and modern Who have ripped off that opening shot so many times. It's like it'd be like if you know how in Dark Shadows they'll do that kind of casual pan to the portrait of Barnabas.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine if there were a series in 2025 that always did that, and it's done in a way that it's like, hey, you remember this? You remember this?
Yeah.
It's like it's a recognizable British sci-fi trope kind of thing, So it's like the audience knows, there's going to be a certain element here.
To sort of do a backdrop of the truffles, their planet was being taken over by the Saiyans at the time, and they put themselves, or what was left of themselves, in these containers, and they sent them to outer space, and they just waited and waited and waited. They didn't go to a specific planet. They just waited and waited. It's crazy. GT is not the best story, but it's interesting.
Well, there's a Star Trek episode that deals with an alien race that's formless. They're energy, so they're in these little orbs and stuff, and they're waiting around
Lights
to
of
take over our
Zetar.
society. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an offshoot of that idea as well.
Yeah.
Popular idea. It makes sense. I mean, it's kind of a cool idea. It's innovative. So
yeah, it's really. I give this movie a 10 out of 10. This was a lot of fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
it really was, and seeing Don Levy in the lead role was fun for me because I had not seen the two of his films.
And the interesting thing is the only reason why Brian Donlevy was chosen to play Quatermass in the first two films was that as Hammer's putting together these films, they worked with a producer named, I think his name was Robert Lippert, who was an American producer and distributor. And he's one of these guys who's like, oh, okay, boys, if you want to sell this film, you're going to need an American star.
Right.
And so he kind of knew Don Levy, who I think by this time, like his noir days were behind him. I think he was doing a radio show called Dangerous Assignment, which is basically about a guy who basically secret agent in the 1950s. So, he's going around starting trouble, he's and I think maybe around this time he might have there's a TV series that he did, which you can actually, I think, can find on Tubi, where they straight up adapt the radio show. And I think this is where maybe Don Levy might have been realizing maybe he needed another source of income. As a secret agent, you figure Don Levy, he's gruff, so he's going to be like, if he's going to play a gruff secret agent, he's going to wear a tie. He might still look old, but he's going to be like kind of like no nonsense. He's wearing like a top hat and an overcoat and like a cravat, and playing these like he's playing himself, but he's playing an older version of the character he purveyed. It's a weird thing to watch, but but it was, I think it was kind of like, okay, well, we'll put Don Levy in these films. I don't think Don Levy I know Neil didn't like Don Levy, thought, no, we don't want him. That's why it took 10 years between this film and Quatermass in the Pit.
Right.
Because they wanted to get, part of it was some other issues, but they wanted to get Lippert out of the way. They didn't want to work with Don Levy. And Neil kind of really wanted to make, because he considered the Quatermass in the Pit his best script of the three.
Right.
They really wanted to. And I still say that Quatermass in the Pit is the best Doctor Who episode that was never produced.
I was about to say, and it's so British. It's much, it's very British with, in certain ways, more so than the first two films for obvious reasons. You have an American star, but I like I said, that was my first exposure to Quatermass, was the third film. So I thought they were all like that, and you definitely get, if you got any background in Doctor Who at all, you definitely get that feeling about that movie.
Yeah. Is there anything you guys want to add about this movie before we go?
It's on Tubi, people. Watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a really high quality, what I refer to as a really high quality 1950s drive-in film. It's really good. It's something that I would love to see on a huge screen. It's just that kind of a thing.
And it's
in the summertime, outdoors under the stars. It would be fun.
And this and the first Quatermass film were the start of Hammer starting to get a reputation as a film company. So if you're thinking that Hammer didn't start until Christopher Lee played Dracula, nope. They were building reputation. This is where the reputation starts to get built.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. Link to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Link to Alan Gallant's YouTube channel, Collinsport After Dark, is going to be in the description box. You guys have a good night.
Good night, all.
Bye.
See you later, guys.